for being here. So I think we're going to start as more people will come through on the call. Right now it is 3:05 in Uganda. I think you guys have different places where you are right now, but we know it is very early in the US at the moment. But we would like to thank you so much for taking the time, and we appreciate your inputs that you're going to hear today. As the American Chamber, our role, we're a platform that that facilitates trade and collaborations between the US and Uganda. So our role is to really let Ugandans know what is going to happen. With a lot of the administration change in the US, there's been a lot of news going around, and people have been wondering what's going on, what's going to happen, mainly in the business landscape. So we thought through and said this would be a good idea, and we reached out to Nestpoint Associates, and you guys, you make the complex sort of topics when it comes to lobbying and all other business related affairs for other people to be able to understand what could be happening in the US. So in the Ugandan perspective, we can be able to hear from you and be able to understand what's going on. So I would like to now introduce our president, Meg Jakwe, to give a few remarks before we start off.
Great. Thanks a lot, Eve. Appreciate it. So good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Meg Jakwe here, president of the American Chamber of Commerce in Uganda. I want to thank our guests from Nestpoint Associates in the US for joining us this morning in your time zone. So today we're here to talk about what recent US government changes will do to affect not only Africa, but the world and its impact on global trade. There is definitely a new sheriff in town. We all know his name. And with that new sheriff, he's brought some new tariffs, which is making people a bit nervous. And things have been changing very fast. And I believe that there's now a new world trade order, right? But we have to look at this as glass half full, because there's definitely opportunities for us to continue to export to the USA from Africa, to get our investments from the United States. Because right now we're only 2% or so of what's imported into the United States. And that's a bit low compared to so many other countries around the world that are competing more heavily. Now, some of you may not know this, but Uganda is no longer in AGOA. And AGOA is set to expire this September. So there's only a few days left for that program. But if you look at how Africa as a whole being a minor player when it comes to the overall trade with the US, instead of looking at this as negative, what we really need to be looking at is, where is that possible next trade agreement? You may not know, but Kenya has an indefinite trade agreement with the 27 member states of the EU. And these relationships, like the ones on our call today, are going to be quite important for us to know what's happening with the Congress people on the Hill, who are those in the government, are going to see Africa as a complement to the US, not as a threat to its economy. So this geopolitical turmoil in the world, it's going to turn perhaps these tariffs into a new version of a recent phrase I was reminded of, globalization. So global brands for a local environment. Now, we're not stepping on anybody's toes when it comes to market share, market expansion, or in this geopolitical arena. So the global supply chain is reorganizing. The manufacturing bases are going to change. Look at Uganda. We are a huge cocoa exporter, but yeah, we import chocolate. And if there are any manufacturers on the call like me, well, I've seen way more inquiries in the last 4 to 6 weeks than I have in the last 4 years. So we need to change the mindset, because as 2050 approaches and 1 in 4 people in the world are going to be from Africa, this is a serious opportunity for our young population, as other populations are aging, to make sure that we're the most productive society and seen that way. So I want to thank our panelists today for joining us and sharing their insights, and I hand it back over to you, Eve.
All right, Meg, thank you so much for that. And we appreciate again, and we are glad to be able to be doing this with Nestpoint. So I think we're going to start off. We so far have quite a number of people that have joined us. So we're going to start off, and we're not going to do any introductions to our members. We would like them to introduce themselves, and then they tell us what they do. So I'll give this opportunity to John to start it off, and then Mike will come through, and then Dr. Valencia will be able to join us as well. So thank you very much. John, please take it away.
Thanks, Eve. Well, good morning on my side to everybody. Thanks for taking the time. And Meg, thank you for that primer. I think that was actually perfectly said and a great way to start this conversation today. There is a new global trade order, and we've been finding over at Nestpoint that it's really provided a lot of opportunities for folks that we're working with, particularly to disrupt perhaps incumbents or things that were done before that might have blocked or prohibited new market competitors or entrants from the market. So what I can do today in my summary, I'll go through a little bit of my background and tell you a little bit about Nestpoint, but I can tell you how I give you a vantage point and a view from the Trump administration in the United States of what they expect out of trade. And then I can talk a little bit about how you can create opportunities if you care to and navigate some of that uncertainty to make profit and expand your businesses and ensure that your country profits from the turmoil. So real quickly, my name is John Thomas. I'm the co-founder and managing director over here at Nestpoint. I do a lot of corporate work, but kind of by trade, since 12 years old, I have been working in political campaigns, primarily for Republican office holders in the United States. I've worked in 49 states, so I've worked everywhere except for Alaska. And I've worked on everything from baby little city council races to senators to president of the United States. And I assisted the President Trump's team from the outside in this cycle. And it turns out a lot of the staff that are currently in the admin either used to work for me or work with me. So I have a unique vantage point in the mindset of a lot of the staff as well as President Trump. So let's talk about how President Trump and this new administration views trade. I think that'll be a good primer. They unabashedly are focused on what is in it for America. And that is the lens of which they look at every trade deal and every opportunity. Prior administrations kind of did more of a give and take in the sense of they were willing to put America perhaps at a back seat if they felt that it was better for kind of the global order of things. That's not President Trump. His worldview is that America has been steamrolled in trade and been taken advantage of, and he wants to balance that out, particularly as it relates to bringing United States manufacturing back to the United States. We call that onshoring. And that's really where the opportunity presents itself, particularly if you manufacture something. Yes, President Trump is wielding tariffs. That's primarily a negotiation tool. Not to say he's not going to wield tariffs. He's going to continue to use it. But this administration is willing to make exceptions, and we help some of our clients navigate those waters if there is something in it for the United States. So an example would be if you manufacture something, if you can bring a portion or a significant portion of that manufacturing, whether it's finishing the product or whatnot, somewhere in the United States, then you can get all the regulatory approvals you need. You can get tariff waivers or reductions. And what we found for some of our clients is that it ends up actually becoming a competitive edge against other manufacturers who make the same product who aren't willing to do that or don't know how to do it. So that's kind of where I would transition is I think you need to look at this as not, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? These tariffs make me unprofitable, and more from the standpoint of, oh, this is an opportunity to work with the United States to actually streamline the process to sell in the United States and give you a competitive edge over other competitors. Another kind of global dynamic I think that's going to play to your country's advantage is East-West tensions between China and the United States. President Trump maintains, and this is quite popular in the United States, that the United States is essentially not in a hot war, hopefully never, but we're at war with China, certainly as it comes to trade. So the United States is looking, is getting very tough on China, and is desperately looking for other countries and other places in the world to start to buy things that we might normally have procured from China. And so, again, physical goods is a major advantage, but also services. The United States is looking for ways to broaden everything we procure and decouple our extreme reliance on China. And the other, I guess the last thing I would say about President Trump is to help you kind of understand his worldview, besides that he was putting America first, President Trump is a deal maker. He comes from the lens, although this some on the other side of the political spectrum thinks this isn't a good thing. I think it's actually a great thing. He comes from the lens of a real estate developer who understands that generally government slows things down, it doesn't speed things up, and that there are deals to be made. Everything's a negotiation. And what can be good both for the real estate developer or the business person can also lift up a community and help a community along the way. So if you look at saying, okay, to Meg's point, yes, there's tariffs and there's all this uncertainty, but actually the uncertainty provides the opportunity for you to strike a deal and to create an opportunity where it may not have existed before. And I guess the last thing I would say before I hand it over is we've heard from some other businesses in Africa, for instance, that, well, they don't have the know-how to onshore manufacturing, or they're not really sure to begin. Don't let that deter you. There are people and organizations and businesses that are looking for you, may not have met you yet, but are looking for you to partner with you and help facilitate that process. So don't feel that you have to carry the burden of doing every step of this process on your shoulders. There are ways to solve and facilitate for that, and you're in luck because this President Trump administration really wants to facilitate that. So you actually will have an ally in the government that will help you kind of navigate those waters, and of course, Nestpoint can help where appropriate as well too. So I just kind of echoing what Meg was saying is, yes, there's a dramatic disruption here. But actually, President Trump is quite consistent when you understand his worldview. And we believe the opportunity actually is in the problem. And it presents places like Uganda and Africa more broadly, unprecedented opportunities that might not have existed prior.
All right. Thank you, John, for that. We'll come back to you at some point.
Okay.
So let's hear from Mike as well.
Well, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you guys. Very familiar with Uganda. I go to Kampala and Entebbe quite a bit. I'm 23 years. I've had a business in Africa, in some country in Africa, for 23 years. So I don't come from the public policy piece of the Nestpoint team. I come from the business side. And ultimately, Africa is essential for America's future. It's essential for the world's future. So I'm a very much an Africanist inside of the Trump sphere. And I will echo what Meg and John both just said, which is you have to look at this as an opportunity. Yes, it's a challenge, but it is an opportunity. So this is my 5th administration. And typically Republicans are better than Democrats for Africa. But you can say that aid and trade and all this, the reality of it is all of that is history. And January 20th, we started a new chapter that we all need to, in our heads, move forward with. And I think there's a huge opportunity for African businesses to partner with U.S. businesses, and it's kind of twofold. One is how John said, how finding partners to onshore businesses is one way, but the other thing that's going to happen is the American business engine is about to turn back on. And as it does, it's going to have an incredible amount of capital that's ready to be placed. And where will that be placed? And how are you as businesses in Africa ready to come and accept partnerships inside of mining, real estate, anything, manufacturing? All of these opportunities are going to happen. And really, from my perspective, tariffs are one piece of it. But ultimately, where we're at, we're in probably a 7-month period where tariffs are going to be thrown around and threatened. But at the end of this year, we're gonna have a very clear indication of where things are, and it's going to be capitalism. It's going to be capitalism and deal making. And if I know anything about Ugandans and Africans, they know how to make deals. So you're on a good positive footing already, because this administration is setting up American businesses to be able to make deals in Africa, wherein before there were a lot of barriers, political risk barriers, financial barriers, financing barriers, insurance barriers. A lot of that will be resolved quite quickly because of the competition with China. And it is a strategic imperative of the United States. And part of leveling that ground is creating opportunities for American finance, American expertise to not come to Africa and conquer, but to come to Africa and partner. And ultimately, that is both in services. Meg mentioned the youth and the ultimately the economy is moving so fast that old guys like me, are going to be irrelevant when it comes to the digital economy and coding and those type of things, which is really where the center mass of the economy is going to be in the next 10 years. And the youth population of Africa and the capture of that is ultimately going to be a step forward that brings African businesses at par. And certainly the other thing Meg said, which is true, is when you're at only 2% of trading with the US, we don't really have to have a trade war with Africa. We're starting really from fresh. So as all these other organizations and countries are fighting it out over tariffs, it offers Africa the opportunity to start fresh. January 20th was day one. Let's do business together. I would stop worrying about AGOA. I don't think AGOA will be renewed. I just don't think that's the way America is going to approach trade going forward. It's going to be on a much more specific basis. And ultimately in Africa, I think it'll be business driven.
Thank you, Matthew. We are absolutely looking forward as the chamber. The biggest environment is all about business, and that's what we represent. And people want to understand what kind of deals are going to come outside of this administration, and what are those prospects that they'll be looking at. I think there'll be a lot of questions that are going to come through. So I'll encourage everybody within the meeting, please, if you have any question, please post it in the chat. We'll be able to go through those questions at some point. But as of now, we are giving our panelists a lot of audience for them to tell us exactly what they think and what would be the best way to approach the situation as it happens now. So I would like to invite Dr. Valencia to give us her points at this point, and then we can move on from Meg. You might add on at some point when Dr. Valencia is done talking, then we'll go back to John.
Right. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak to you all today. One thing I wanted to do, besides just echo what Michael, Meg, and John have all said, which is very critically important, is I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about a tactical approach to how do you do business in the United States. And one of the number one things that the US is looking for is opportunities in renewables. And that includes all things technical, to include battery storage, materials that support battery storage. What we do at Nestpoint is we have really embraced the use of artificial intelligence to help us optimize and develop more efficient supply chains. So the old ways of logistics from Africa to the United States, think about new, optimized, leveraged opportunities to partner with other organizations so that we can streamline those supply chains, as well as introduce not only your physical and products that you might develop in Uganda, but more importantly, your intellectual property. So that means your knowledge base, your technical expertise coming out of your universities, opportunities for you to secure relationships with the United States from an intellectual and knowledge-based perspective. There is so much opportunity in the future of power delivery. So if you have any kind of contribution that you can make in that arena, that would be extremely helpful. And also, one other thing that I want to bring up is right now in the United States, we have a lot of infrastructure that is not being used and a lot of capital equipment, CapEx, manufacturing warehouses, real estate that is not being used today. It would be a great opportunity if you have some type of operation that you could develop in the United States using existing capital equipment and existing manufacturing facilities so that you could deploy your product in the United States at a much lower cost than you would if you had to start from scratch. And we are thinking about consortiums. So you don't have to buy the whole warehouse, but perhaps you can have a piece in the warehouse. Perhaps you develop 90% of your product in Uganda and the last 10% in the United States. Lots of opportunity there. So open your mind, and please ask questions in the chat, and I'm happy to answer any of those questions for you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Valencia. Meg, do you have something to add before I go back to John?
Yeah, I think what I picked out of that, and thank you all. I think what I picked out of what Murph, as he's called, said, how do we in Uganda figure out how to negotiate our businesses into the practical solutions that the United States needs? When I talk business and I talk to entrepreneurs, I always say, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? And maybe you can help comment on what do you think, besides what Dr. Valencia just said about renewables and just our intellectual property that we might have here in our youth, what other practical solutions might you see, an agricultural based country like ours here in Uganda? What can we offer to the United States?
May I take that one?
Yes,
Sure.
please.
So your expertise, so one of the things that the United States has started to deploy with the U.S. Department of Agriculture is this new development called agri-solar. And agri-solar is the implementation of photovoltaic solar cells and battery storage. It's using large areas of real estate that have livestock and agriculture. And what we're doing is we're using that real estate to capture sunlight so that we can store power. One of the biggest challenges we have is our farmers have been spoiled over the last several decades. And what we need is innovative ideas surrounding how to farm with less resources, how to raise livestock and develop crops with less resources. And the world is looking to Africa because they have managed to do that in many occasions. And so we're talking about knowledge base, technical expertise, advisories, consultancies, that kind of knowledge that you could bring to the United States would be incredibly helpful. There is a dearth of knowledge there that could be fulfilled by Ugandan expertise in agriculture.
And I would add that as Ugandan agriculture starts to find partners in the U.S., it works both ways. There's joint venture opportunities as well, where U.S. manufacturing of equipment and exporting that equipment to Uganda for use in a joint venture in Ugandan agriculture works to the Trump America First kind of world where, we're importing food products, even processed food products. Maybe it's a joint venture to actually do the cocoa and create the chocolate, but the equipment came from the United States. So it's, those are the partnership opportunities where you have to look at it as, the three steps, the harvesting of it, the manufacturing of it, the shipping of it. And there's opportunities, both Dr. Valencia said in one direction, but there's opportunities in the other direction as well. So I would encourage everyone to look at it holistically, not piece by piece. If you look at it holistically, we can help. At Nestpoint, for instance, we help clients find the people in the supply chain to all partner together so that they have, a holistic view of the entire product from, in agriculture, from, let's say, seed to shelf.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Dr. Valencia. As a Ugandan business person and also leading an organization that has a lot of businesses, to a place where we sit, one of the biggest challenges I would say in Uganda is the cost of capital, for example. And capital for us is a bit expensive, even if when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to any other kind of investments that people really want to do in. So when we are talking about trade deals, we are looking at what are the opportunities when it comes to capital, because as a country, capital is expensive and we really don't have much of it when it comes into our economy. So I would like to ask a question: what are the opportunities when it comes to the bits of capital, the opportunities in venture capitalism, for example? Are there opportunities in that sector that would be Americans that are interested in that sector? Also in the funding side, are there opportunities of where the Americans that would be interested in investing in Uganda, and at what level do they come in, and at where do the Ugandans fit in when it comes to that?
I can take this if that's
No
okay.
problem. No problem.
Okay. Sure. Great question about capital. There's a variety of ways to approach it. First, to Murph's earlier point, the American engine is about to be unleashed. I mean, we have been dormant, not just for 4 years, but for at least a decade. And that's in part because Americans have been suffocated under just a lot of regulations. That's no longer the case. And so you're seeing businesses with capital looking to deploy that capital. And it's not just within the United States. If there is an end goal of bringing jobs to the United States, bringing product to the United States, our capital isn't just going to remain here. So I'd say there's a lot of opportunity. We're seeing it amongst our clients that are looking to deploy American capital. And there's also foreign capital that might normally have gone to another country like China, but they don't want to place their capital there anymore because the Trump administration doesn't want product or new product from China. So I'd say there's also foreign capital here. It's actually one of the things at Nestpoint, we actually do capital placement. So we help, we have some of our own capital. We also kind of match make where appropriate to bring capital. But so I would look in part, sometimes you'll find that with the right matchmaking, the right manufacturing partners, part of that deal should be capital. So in addition to whether it's know-how or equipment, that they can bring capital in addition. And then there are just capital providers. And we're even seeing it from, not so much from venture capitalists, but more private equity capitalists, people that are looking to invest in business, like manufacturing, not necessarily looking for the next Google or Facebook, but looking to help get stuff out of the ground, things that are lower risk, a higher degree of certainty, but that just need capital, especially if that empowers you to sell something that the United States needs. So I hope that gives you a sense.
You so much, John, on that. Just maybe to add on, when you look at Uganda in general, one of our biggest, I would say, opportunities that we have to offer, we have one of the youngest generation when it comes to human capital. We have one of the youngest generation here. And then also, that generation is also well educated and willing to learn. If there are opportunities that can be, if you look at what the administration is setting up, where are the opportunities that a generation like that, like ours, with the youngest population, and then as well as that is well educated, but also there's an issue of unemployment. If you see the opportunities, if you look at this generation, where do you see the opportunities that a lot of Ugandans can look into and say, this could be an avenue when I have to work and partner with the US?
I could take a crack at, oh, go ahead, Valencia.
Okay. All right. My first pass is, this is a really great question, because when you look at the education across the United States, you see that a lot of the focus has been on more liberal arts and humanities degrees at the higher level. And we have what I would argue is, regrettably or fortunately for Ugandans, not so much scientific study. And so I think in the United States, we're struggling with our technical expertise, particularly in the hard sciences, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I would argue this population that you're referring to, I've met some of these young men and women at international conferences who are really studying the hard sciences and are really coming up with some innovative and creative ideas that just, there was simply no opportunity to bring them to the United States, or the technical focus for a lot of these hard sciences was happening in China. Well, as you know, the new Trump administration wants to change that, and we need that intellectual expertise. You may hear that the presidential administration is being tough on immigration, and that is true. But there are exceptions for intellectual knowledge, and there are opportunities for people to come from all over the world, not just Africa, to bring their technical expertise. And there will be opportunity for that, because the United States intends to improve and increase their technical expertise across the hard sciences. So I would encourage you to explore that avenue versus just talk about securing jobs, but really look at where the intellectual need is needed in the United States as it pertains to the hard sciences.
I'd like
And
to
I would
comment on
add,
that. Okay,
oh,
go ahead.
Meg. No, go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. No,
Okay,
I wanted
I
to
would add that computer science as well. I mean, the digital economy is really the wave of the future. Um, as Dr. De La Vega said, the U.S. is focused for too long on the humanities, and it is the opportunity for Africa and a younger generation to be able to really dive in there in STEM and engineering, but also in the computer sciences. I think there's a tremendous opportunity there, because that can be remote work, that can be, a workforce that is in Uganda doing work for U.S. companies in the United States. That, there's a whole potential there. And I think we don't forget that as well.
Yeah, I think, having Uganda also be, unfortunately, a hub for a lot of outbreak of diseases. I think a lot of those science solutions are also here. We have a
Yes.
huge fintech, segment of our population that's here. We, as if, and all of us have mentioned, we have such a young population that, the technology is second fiddle to them. Whereas, those of us who are, used to the old ways, are still always trying to catch up, but they don't know the old ways, right? So they've far advanced us when it comes to that. I wanted to touch on that underutilized capacity here that was also mentioned earlier. This is also one of those things that I talk about when I talk to young entrepreneurs. We have plenty of underutilized capacity, in fact, in manufacturing here, maybe not on a huge scale, But it's always important when you're looking to maybe start your brand, start with something that maybe there's a factory in existence that can contract manufacture for you temporarily while you help to build a brand. And maybe some of that expertise in that factory can be also utilized for those American brands. If somebody's looking, to do that 90% here, there's plenty of potential here existing already. And I like to hear that you all say that, there's a lot of doors that potentially could be opening for American investment here when it comes to, all of these different sectors that we were just talking about.
Right. I think the American investment piece this is huge because there are still a lot of Americans that have a lot of money and they want to put it in places that they feel confident it won't be messed with. We can see right now in Europe, there's a lot of destabilization. There's a lot of lack of confidence of where to invest in those opportunities. Latin America, South America, they also struggle with a lot of those areas for investment. The Chinese have really taken over a lot of Latin American and South American manufacturing facilities to include mining. I think Africa really needs to be the one that steps forward in the global setting that says, hey, we're here and this is the great place to do business. And I think that that's going to be very attractive to American investors who want opportunities to invest their money in places that they haven't before. And I think they welcome the diversification of their portfolios and also exploring areas of investment that they hadn't looked at before. For example, textiles or other opportunities as opposed to the hard sciences. So I hope that helps explain just a little bit more about the mindset of the American investor.
And I think also you have to, as let's say African business leaders, lobby your own governments for deregulation. As the American engine is looking for places to put its capital, it's going to look at places that are easier to do business in. And so, as American Chamber of Commerce and as Ugandan business owners, you are uniquely positioned to tell your own governments, this is what we're hearing, this is what we need. It is a partnership ultimately. That's the only way we're gonna make this work is if both sides kind of come to the table as partners and everybody gets a win out of it. There's one thing about Donald Trump. He'll make a deal, but he doesn't make deals where the other side gets punished. The other side actually ends up winning as well. So it's that type of mentality you have to look at it from a business perspective. I've always had that. My own personal businesses. If both sides aren't ultimately happy, you're not going to be successful. So that goes to the government levels in Africa, and certain governments are better than others. But ultimately, as I said in the beginning of this, we're at a reset. So it's the opportunity now to not look at what you've done in the past with the United States. What are you going to do in the future? What are we going to do together in the future? And look at it that way.
Yeah, I
All right,
totally agree.
Yeah, thank you so much. John, do you have something to say?
No, it was said really well. Yeah, there, that was great.
Yeah, so another point I wanted to mention to you guys is the issue of infrastructure. For example, when it comes to manufacturing, to a lot of the spaces, the country like Uganda, and now I'm speaking in the aspect of Uganda, if we're looking to do big export markets, and US is one of those questions I get every day. How do I get into the US market? How do I get a partner in the US? Because the US market seems to be that market that is very hard to break into, although it has the biggest potential for countries like Uganda when it comes to export. For people who are into textile, people who are into art and craft kind of space, and then the technology side. So the biggest challenge we would be facing is the infrastructure. Are there opportunities for Americans that are looking to say, I am willing to invest my money back in Uganda, build up a factory that is supposed to do export? A lot of the things I hear on my table for a lot of Americans that come in and are looking to say we want to invest in Uganda is the infrastructure issue, because you get and even some of the investors that come through, their pockets, their kind of ticket of investment is sometimes too big to find a partner in Uganda, for example, who is willing to be that partner without the US partner looking as if they're the ones doing all the work. And Uganda is really giving in the smallest size of investment. So we're looking at opportunities. We're seeking to see opportunities that really where the infrastructure, people are looking into investing into infrastructure in the manufacturing side, in the industry where Meg is agriculture, because that's our number one sort of breadwinner into Uganda. Are there opportunities that we can see and deals that are trade deals that will come through that will support in the issues of infrastructure when it comes to the Uganda?
Can I take the first pass?
Sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And then John will probably answer the trade deal part, but I'd like to approach it from the tactical perspective. So you talked about the past, right? And I know that that's your recency, and that's exactly what you are used to in terms of the typical American investor looking at manufacturing in Uganda. But remember, the United States wants to switch that. We want to bring manufacturing back to the United States from various parts of the world, specifically China. However, that's going to take a while. And what we call that is onshoring. We're bringing back manufacturing to the United States. So it's not a complete flip, but it's a gradual process, because so much of the manufacturing that's been outsourced outside of the United States has required an immense amount of labor, capital equipment, and time. And we can't just turn that switch off overnight. So when you're thinking about manufacturing in Uganda, think about it as an onshoring process to get it back to the United States, but that's going to take some time. So that's where the Ugandan expertise comes in. And hey, we can manufacture this for you here, and then we're going to show you how to do it in the United States. And by the way, we are going to partner with you so that the United States, whatever partner you deal with, and Ugandan companies can both profit from that. And it's not one side taking advantage of the other like it was for China for the last several decades.
Yeah, Eve, as it relates to infrastructure, the way I would look at this is, for instance, if it's, there's insufficient power for certain manufacturing facilities, or well, let's use power as a good example. I know that at Nestpoint, for instance, part of some of the things we're working on is that's part of like bringing together multiple partners to solve a problem. So if there was somebody who had equipment and capital that wanted to help start up that manufacturing, using renewables, finding a renewable partner, bringing that renewable partner together that could use alternative power, whether it's nuclear or solar or something like that, to bring together privately components of the infrastructure that'd be necessary to create that hub of manufacturing. So I would say, in this sense, we just have to get creative in terms of solving for some of the infrastructure components. And then I think the other thing is, to Murph's point, having governments that are in Uganda that are willing to collaborate, provide incentives and other things to make it easier to put in that infrastructure, or incentivize building that infrastructure. So it's not just, I'd say, the American lift that is needed, although I think there are a lot of American partners that can solve for a lot of those infrastructure things, but it's also creating the incentive package. So it makes a lot of sense, perhaps beyond just that one manufacturing facility, to invest in a longer time horizon. So kind of coming full circle, not to put the pressure back on this group, but it really does need to be a partnership, and a Chamber of Commerce is actually the best lobbying vehicle to tell their government, like, you need to be open to this. Not only if there are regulatory hurdles, to slash those or suspend those, but also think about tax incentives and other things that can facilitate people that would want to bring infrastructure to, we're focused, for instance, on AI data centers. And everybody thinks about data centers as just the semiconductor, the chips, but there's so much more that goes into these things. Particularly, they consume an immense amount of power. And a lot of people think that you might not be able to put it in a developing area, but that's not true. With a combination of alternative power sourcing, you can build these data centers. So I think there are a lot of ways that infrastructure can be provided privately, but it does have to be perhaps not a formal public-private partnership, but the government needs to roll out the red carpet, much in the same way the United States is slashing our regulatory state. We would need help from your government as well to pull that off. But I assume all of our incentives will be aligned, and that's possible. But just to let you know that would be necessary.
All right, thank you so much, John. I don't know if you guys have anything to add on, or if you have any other points that you want to add on before I take it to the audience to ask a few questions. For those that have any questions to ask, you can either type it in here. I will give you a few minutes for people to ask any questions, but I'll argue everybody to sort of ask the question related to the topic, to make sure that we are not going off topic in any way. So for those who are looking to ask questions that are connected to the topic, please, you can put them in the chat, or we can be able to answer them. We'll ask a few people to really be able to ask. And if you're asking that question, be very brief so that our members can be able to understand. I want to ask if Meg, you want to add anything before we go to the audience? And
yeah, so when it comes to Nestpoint Associates, what is the service that you might be offering some of our Ugandan businesses, if it's available?
Sure. It's a good question, Meg. I mean, the answer is, I guess it depends if it's a good fit, but at a high level, we do a variety of things. So if Ugandan business was trying to figure out how to navigate trade policies or trade issues, regulatory issues, we call it like regulatory friction or regulatory hurdles, we can help you navigate that and get it streamlined quickly. So we can help with that. If there are tariffs or duties or fees that make it not feasible to do business with the United States, we can help solve that as well. And then to what Murph was saying earlier, and Valencia is an expert at kind of supply chain side, but if there is a Ugandan business that, say, hypothetically makes something, but doesn't know how to get from 0 to 1 to get to the United States because they're missing a strategic collaborator in that supply chain process, we can go, if we don't have it already in-house, we could potentially go find a partner and put together that deal for the Ugandan business to complete their supply chain. So, and then if there's capital that's necessary and it makes sense, we can figure out how to solve for that as well. So essentially kind of from soup to nuts, we help facilitate your business succeed, particularly if you want to do business with the United States. If you're looking to do business with Norway or something, I mean, probably other firms that might be on the speed dial before us, but we can kind of solve almost any problem as it relates to doing business with the United States or wanting to send goods or end up figuring out how to transact with the United States. The other thing on the regulatory side, if the U.S. government has made it difficult, not just from duties or tariffs, but if they've restricted something in your country, we can get an ear with the Trump administration and figure out how to unwind that and make it a win so that commerce can happen again.
So one more comment, and you may not be able to answer this, but Uganda was obviously one of the largest recipients of aid from the U.S. government, $1 billion a year. And that's made a lot of people nervous. And I know we're talking about trade here, but what, if any, advice might you have for us as businesses to either step in, replace that role, or,
Mhm.
you know, what do we tell people, I guess, is the
Sure.
biggest question that we get is,
Sure.
I know we have no crystal balls, and I know, we don't think AGOA is going to come back, which didn't impact us anyway, because we don't have it anymore. But, a lot of people are just nervous about the aid perspective.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what could potentially be a positive that could come out of this for Uganda?
Sure. Well, it's not just Uganda that's getting their aid slashed. It's all essentially all foreign countries that were the beneficiary of aid. President Trump is trying to essentially strengthen the balance sheet of the United States, and that partially means that he's going to be slashing aid to other countries. I mean, that's just where we're at. I don't anticipate that coming back. However, on the other side, you have the positive ledger, which is trade. You have a trade partner, potentially the United States, that it wants to do more business than they've ever done before in the history of our relationship together. So I would look at it from a standpoint of there's going to be potentially, and I think all of us are on the call because we tend to agree with this, which is there's unprecedented economic opportunity that can lift up the local economy and provide it. And with the economic prosperity, will make up for a lot of potentially that aid that was given by the United States before, and perhaps make it more long lasting. So I would look at it saying, okay, how can we provide jobs and sustainable manufacturing and businesses for Uganda that might not have existed before, because the US government really wants to facilitate that. So while aid is disappearing, trade is increasing. And I think that's how you have to look at making it up. And then the other side is, and this is more of Trump agrees with this worldview, and so do most Republicans in the United States, which is we believe that the role of like philanthropic help should not necessarily be from the government, but private charities. So I think the other thing is, with more economic prosperity, particularly in the United States, that there are going to be charities that and businesses that want to help philanthropically and fill some of that need. So if there are glaring holes that were left that are not going to be solved by increased trade as a result of you losing some aid, I think it's important to voice those concerns more broadly, because I do believe that Americans and American business would like to help solve some of those gaps philanthropically. I just wouldn't look toward the government to come back and fill those holes, because that's not happening in the next, during this administration.
I would add that you need to look at it like a balance sheet. He looks at aid. He looks at aid as an expense, and he's cutting expenses. But as he cuts those expenses, he's creating incentives both for foreign trade and for U.S. businesses to do trade, where it's moving it from the expense side to the other side of the balance sheet, so that ultimately there's going to be I sit on the board of two NGOs that got USAID funding, so I understand completely the panic. But philanthropically, if you're value for money, there's still going to be opportunities for you there. But I think, let's say philosophically, in the next 4 years, nothing's going to change. It's going to be America's not going to spend money on things that are not for investment. And so just depending on where your worldview is, it's good or bad, frankly. I think we call it a Nestpoint trade versus aid, or trade versus aid. And that's where we're going to end up, is US companies incentivized to do trade overseas with countries that are incentivized to do trade with the United States. And that's where the balance sheet is going to be judged. It's not going to be judged on foreign aid anymore.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. And
so in a nutshell, what that means is, if you weren't paying attention, it means it really it's on us businesses to do more business.
Yes.
Yes.
That's in a nutshell. Yes. That's
and lobby your own governments to say, hey, we're ready to do business, but you got to help us empower ourselves to do business and empower investors to come to the country. And that's rule of law, that's, regulations, that's a lot of things. But yes, Meg, you're spot on.
Right, and we have our presidential president's roundtable, President's Club roundtable, which one of the directives of that group is basically help us with this policy, not rewrite, but recommendations, right? What is it that's holding us back? And there's a few of them that are obviously cost of capital here is ridiculous at 21% or more. So that's our biggest disincentive. So that's why we're always looking for partners to bring in cheaper cost of capital so that we can grow our businesses. So I'm going to look to the President's Club roundtable to really listen to this session and turn this around and say, how can we as AmCham members, talk to, our powers that be here and talk to them about this particular, I mean, I love the concept of removing things on the balance sheet from one side to the other. I think all of us as businesses, we should always be, making sure, that our debts don't outweigh our credits. So I'm going to, ask that, those of you who are on the roundtable, take this to heart and find out from all of us here what are our five biggest pain points, and let's talk to the government and see how we can open our doors more easily to this American investment that's going to come in. Yes, Valencia.
Yeah, well said, Meg. And I want to add to that, as business leaders, I would be prepared to be able to tell your story to investors. Craft your story so that it's compelling, and have your marketing and your selling strategy ready to go. Because when the investors come, they're going to want to hear the most compelling story. So it's not just, hey, can we partner with you? But be prepared to tell your story about where your passion is in your craft and what it is that you're doing and what you're trying to deliver. I think that's going to be hugely impactful for an audience that's looking to invest.
There's a good question here from Joshua
Yes.
about
Yes.
XM and DFC. And
Yeah.
the quick answer is we don't know yet. It feels like it's been a year since the president's been elected, but it's been a month. So we really don't know. He hasn't got to it yet. I will say I can't speak to XM as much as I can for DFC. DFC actually was a first Donald Trump administration creation out of OPIC. He transformed OPIC into DFC, and I was part of the advisory of that. And ultimately, he was convinced that the cost of capital was prohibitive for American businesses to do business overseas. And DFC's mission is being changed so that American businesses can have some type of U.S. backing to lower the cost of capital when they bring investments overseas. We don't know, as a new administrator, we don't know what it is, but I will tell you that Nestpoint is in the conversations there to help make that an entity that is on the proper side of the balance sheet for American investors to make investments overseas and have protection, political risk protection, but also have financial protection so that we can lower the cost of capital and make the American investment arm really drive into the world. XM, I wouldn't be too bullish on XM.
All right. As Mike, I just wanted to maybe to add on a point of what you were just saying, and maybe you can help me to also elaborate that. When it comes to DFC, for example, some of the tickets that from the past few years when it was being introduced to Ugandans, some of the tickets that DFC really brings to Uganda are quite bigger tickets, like I said. So, and those bigger tickets really don't have enough potential Ugandans that are willing to take on those tickets. Since you've been sitting on that and you know a little bit of what has been happening, is there any potential that maybe those investment caps can be lowered a little bit to really fit the market themselves on where they are going into? Because it has been a bigger kind of a ticket that a lot of Ugandans can't afford to take on.
Eve, I have to tell you, you have to stand by. We just don't know. We're in the
All
process
right.
now of trying to influence those conversations.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think both OPIC and DFC, I built 6 hotels in Africa with OPIC financing. It was very, very slow, very, very hard to deal with, just not efficient at all. And government typically isn't efficient in doing things. I think what we have the opportunity with this administration, he's taking a fresh approach at everything, even from his first administration. So I would have to tell you to stand by, but I think it'll be quite rapid because even if the United States is discussing creating a sovereign wealth fund, there's there's so many things going on, but there's got to be mechanisms to deliver that, to deliver that side of the balance sheet to the world. And I think DFC is one that will be there. But I wish I had a better answer for you, but it really is standby.
No problem. But again, I don't know if there's anybody else who's having any question that we can be able to answer before I let
Pamela. It looks like Pamela has a question. Pamela Natamba.
Pamela.
Pamela, go ahead and
Yeah.
ask your question.
She's raised her hand, Eve. You would have to unmute her.
Amanda.
We didn't really have the floor open to questions like that. But
Yes,
Pamela, is it
yeah.
something you can type in the chat?
Or you can unmute yourself. Pamela, you're even unmuted on our side to be able to answer, to ask your question, sorry.
Hi.
Hi, Pamela.
Sorry, I think there was a mix-up. I'm Sophie Kaimba from PwC.
Yes, Sophie. Please go ahead and ask.
Yes, so thank you very much for organizing this session. Mine is about the interplay between the oil and gas sector and what is going on in the US. As you may be aware, the oil and gas sector in Uganda is facing a number of challenges, especially around obtaining funding for the construction of the EACOP pipeline. That's the pipeline from Hoima to Tanzania to transport the crude oil. Now, and that issue is mainly because a number of banks, Western banks, withdrew in providing financing to the pipeline, citing the impact on the climate. So with Trump's renewed stand, if I may say, which is pro-oil drilling, is there any hope in the changing stance for maybe American banks or the American government to come in and step in and support the EACOP pipeline? Thank you.
I would say probably the American government would not step in. We're out of the government business, but I would say if the people who are putting the pipeline together took a step back and maybe called Nestpoint, but took a step back and said, how do we get American equipment, American materials? You start from that perspective, that's how you need to approach the U.S. now in these type of transactions, which is there's going to be a huge amount of oil exploration in the United States domestically. So there's going to be a little pressure there, but to have any hope of Western or let's say American banks or American finance come in, there's got to be a component into it where American equipment is being used, American expertise in partnership with Uganda. And so I think that would be my first step. But Dr. De La Vega may have a more to add.
Right. I think I heard you, Sophie. You mentioned that it was stopped because there was a climate concern.
Hello?
Right? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it wasn't necessarily about financing, but there was a concern about its impact to the environment.
So I think the European banks pulled out because of environmental concerns.
Environmental concerns,
okay.
yes.
Right. Okay. Then I second what Michael said. Yeah. United States investors, United States companies, while we do care about the climate, I would argue that there's opportunity there for Ugandans to explore oil and gas. Definitely leverage the opportunity that the United States is taking with moving forward on more exploration for oil and gas. There's a lot of opportunity to partner with those existing companies that are doing that work. And I think not only is the United States going to be focusing more on their own oil and gas exploration, but certainly for the security of the country would be looking outside to partner with countries as well outside of Europe. I think that's a key point right there that everybody needs to remember, outside of Europe.
All right.
Any other questions?
Any other questions before? There are more questions in the chat?
Okay.
Let me
I want to add one more thing. I'm not sure I covered it enough. I think it's really important that Ugandans explore the technical piece of what the future looks like. So I noticed some people mentioned in the chat that there are minerals that support semiconductor manufacturing, minerals that all kinds of materials and minerals that could support the making of chips, for example, printed circuit boards, all of those things that would relate to high technical types of manufacturing opportunities that we are onshoring back to the United States, to include intellectual property and knowledge expertise. President Trump has been very clear about sourcing minerals outside of China. And I understand that there are opportunities in Uganda to export those minerals export those minerals that I'm talking about to the United States to support all areas of manufacturing, to include battery manufacturing and semiconductor chip manufacturing, as well as solar panels, photovoltaic panels. Please, please, please focus on these areas if you have an opportunity to partner with a company like that, or if you have a company like that, because that is where most of the opportunity will lie.
All right. The question that I saw here was coming from Ningai. She's saying export of goods and good services and equipment to Africa via Exim Bank. So Exim Bank of the US can partake the oil and gas project. She's Ningai, like the way Mike was saying, he's not very sure about the Exim Bank. But I think if at any one point, if that comes in, I think then that will be the right place to approach when it comes to the oil and gas for the Ugandan market. I don't know if you're asking from the Tanzanian perspective or you're asking from the Ugandan side.
The answer is the same either way.
Yes. it's either side. Okay. So I don't see any other questions in the chat unless I've missed any. There was a question of somebody who asked about how can I leverage on the trade policies shift to implemented during the Trump administration to benefit my handcraft jewelry business, which utilizes local resourced and sustainable materials like cow horn, mafia, and palm leaves and recycled brass. Additionally, what are your focused on the jewelry industry, and how can I position my business for success in the coming years? So I don't know if kind of questions on how we can all position our businesses have been set up, although this one is very specific to the jewelry industry, as she's using a lot of raw materials. I'll let Dr. to kind of answer that if you read the question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And as an individual company, I would encourage you to partner and create a consortium of sorts, because if you are very small, you're going to struggle. And I think it's the partnerships that you're going to need to explore. And so that would mean consortium partnerships there in Uganda, or more importantly, partnering in the United States. So adding your product to somebody's existing portfolio in the United States, I think finding that market, that particular customer, that would be the first start. And then, of course, building a partnership with somebody else and not trying to do it alone. It's going to be too difficult, I think, if you have a very small business.
Yeah, and I think that plays into one of the issues that we have here of too many silos. I'll give an example of baskets. So there's an NGO that buys baskets and ships out something like 15 shipping containers of baskets from Uganda to the US. But he buys from, 10 different basket producers here. So, and I mentioned earlier about, all of the manufacturing deals that I've been, that have been coming across my desk just in the last 6 to 8 weeks. And, we're talking about shipping containers of things, not boxes. So
Nice.
we have to think bigger for
Yes.
sure as individual businesses. And, even me, I look at it as co-opetition. So I
Yeah.
may have competitors, but we have to cooperate when it comes to being able to fulfill some of these larger orders that are potentially come our way.
Yes. And do look at, I think a compliment to that, Meg, is do look at the existing supply chain of what are the products coming out of China and how can I disrupt that and replace it?
Very interesting point. Thank you.
All right. So I think there was one more extra question that is coming in from Doreen. Mike would like to leave, right?
Yeah,
So-
unfortunately, I have a hard stop right now. I've got another call, but I wanted to thank everybody for taking the time. I will be in Uganda sometime in the next month or two. So if there's anything specifically we can discuss, I'm happy to move forward with that. But wish everybody good fortune, and we're gonna get through this together. It's really an exciting time. You need to look at it from a positive perspective.
Thank you, Murph.
Thank
All
you,
right,
guys.
thank you so
Bye-bye.
much, Mike. All right, bye-bye. So we'll take, we are also going to stop at the next probably 14 minutes. So I will take this question that comes from Doreen, which is, what are some of the examples of low-risk ventures that private capital firms are targeting in Uganda, and how can those be scaled to export to the US? Maybe Doctor, you can look at it, and John, you can look at that question. It's by Doreen Mugisha.
Right. The private capital firms are targeting. So I'm gonna call this investors, right?
Yeah.
And how can these be scaled for okay, this is just what I think Meg was referring to, her cooperation.
No,
I think
co-opetition.
co-opetition.
Yeah.
Competitive,
so
like cooperative competition.
cooperative, but
Co-opetition.
competition. I
Yep.
love that. That's a good one. So that they can be scaled for export to the US. I think that's huge in terms of partnering with somebody for the supply chain bit. Now, as far as the low risk ventures, low risk investment opportunities, I think that's what you're asking. Again, I think this is a consortium of sorts. I think it depends on the individual investor. Again, it's not going to be necessarily probably private capital firms that are targeting smaller companies, but maybe larger consortium approaches. I hope that helps answer that a little bit.
Yeah, and in addition to what you said about, look at what China's producing and replace it. A lot of what we're seeing from an agricultural perspective, at least in my sector, is where were the main players and why are they coming to Uganda? So for example, Costa Rica and West Africa. So something is going on in those countries that is disrupting the supply chain for pineapples. So that's why Uganda pineapples are so hot right now. So it could be climate change, it could be soil depletion, it could be it could be political issues, climate change causing lack of water, whatever it might be. But something is changing. So I think just everybody needs to be looking at your sector and what's happening in the global trade world with respect to it. And you're going to have to embrace change if you're going to grow your business.
Yes, very well said.
All right. I don't see any more questions. I don't know if there's anybody who has any more questions. If we do not have any more questions, I would like to go back to what John said immediately when he started the session. He said that the Trump administration is looking at everything as what is in for America. So, and that is how we all have to look at this administration and say what, like the panelists have been saying, we need to get ready. We need to make sure that we are able to work and partner and look at bilateral trade as a main point between Uganda and the US. And we look at that and see what are the opportunities. They've said, let's see what China is doing. What are the opportunities I can take from there? Because again, Mike was saying, US is like on a trade war with China. So how do we play into that field of that trade war and figure out how does Africa fit in this whole sort of new administration, and what are the opportunities that are there into the trade policies that are being placed and the tariffs that I've mentioned. And the other day I was listening to President Trump saying, we are going to do business. If you are imposing 25% of your goods to the US as a tariff, we shall impose back 25%. But I'm sure when it comes to Africa, there will be some sort of looking at the countries in very much specific at what are the opportunities do those countries offer, and how can we partner together as a continent as well as with the US. So I would like to thank you guys for taking your time. We know it's very early in the US, but thank you so much for taking your time and doing this with us. If we have any more questions, again, we would like to say that we will seek your talk again, if that's allowed to us. If people are asking for more, we would like to partner with you more and then be able to do more for the Ugandans to understand how the policies of the new Trump administration, how it's going to be able to help Ugandans to do business well, and how can they take the opportunities there. Meg, I would like you to give a few, no, first let me go with Doctor and then John to say their closing remarks, then Meg, you can do your own closing remarks.
Okay. Just in closing, thanks again for the opportunity to talk to your group. Again, lots of opportunity out there, and remember, the best opportunity right now is in the technical sciences. So anything that supports those opportunities in the United States.
All right, thank you, Dr. John.
Of course, I echo what Valencia said, and it really was a pleasure to be with everybody this morning. So thanks again. This is the beginning of a longer conversation relationship we get to have. I would just say, particularly at Nestpoint, but we've never been more bullish and excited about trade opportunities and global trade than we are now. So it's just it is in the United States right now, the animal spirits of capitalism and commerce are alive, and people want to do business. We have a government that wants to facilitate trade, and there's just immense opportunities, particularly to displace incumbents that might have had essentially monopolies on certain kinds of trade. I think that I would just remind you that while it may seem daunting or confusing with the trade, there really are incredible opportunities. So I would strongly encourage you to remain optimistic and look for the opportunities and not be worried about the change.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, John. Meg, we would like you to close us off on this opportunity. But before that, I'd like to thank everybody who has joined us.
Okay, well,
and then we will have more of those that are coming through. Yes, go ahead, Meg.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you so much, Dr. Valencia and John, for really sharing some incredible insights. I don't think we've ever had anybody, and I've never spoken to anybody, who has had such connections into the presidential way of thinking. And so when you're able to turn that into something that we can absorb into our businesses and improve, it's obviously going to be of tremendous value to all of us here in Uganda. And I hope that it's going to make us stronger as American brands that are here, Americans that are wanting to continue to do business here and continue to bring in new American investment here into Uganda. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And we look forward to talking to you again soon. Have a great day.
All right.
Likewise.
Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely soon-to-be weekend. And Mike, John, and Dr. Valencia, thank you so much. We'll be in touch for more. And then for everybody, anyone wants to know more about the chamber and your non-term member, please get in touch. The contacts have been shared. We are a platform that is able to facilitate bilateral trade between the US and Uganda. So please reach out to us, to our members. Thank you so much for being here. So we wish you a lovely evening. Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Thank you, Eve.
Bye, Meg.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thank you.